Hello, friends. Today I'm going to be talking about forgiving my parents and things that just help me get to that place. I'm going to say them in no particular order, which I like to do because it kind of just gives me more of an ability to speak organically and freely. But anyway, so these are just things that in my own personal journey that I came to the conclusion of and learned. And I do think that this is kind of a helpful thing and a place that a lot of women struggle with, just because naturally, when you become a mom, you kind of enter into the world more concretely of family. And when you're raising your own kids, you start to notice maybe the things that you didn't get when you're figuring out the things you want to give to your children, and then you realize, oh, that's not something that I was given to as a child. Or if your parents are in your life and you see them and interacting with your kids or hear the things that they say to your children, sometimes it just rehashes some things out and maybe reminds you of things from the past that you maybe haven't thought about um, or you've always been bothered by, and now it's coming up again. So, anyways, I'm just gonna jump right into it. So, prior to getting married, prior to getting married, I definitely had a lot of resentment in my heart towards my parents. Most of my childhood, I had a lot of unforgiveness and resentment towards my parents. And that's just because they just didn't have a great marriage. My parents spent a lot of time yelling, they fought a lot. I felt like I had to really grow up and lost a lot of my childhood innocence because I had to always be so involved in the drama that was going on with my parents. And in particular, the thing that I definitely was angry with them about was the fact that they yelled so much. They argued a lot and they were always so angry. And that manifested in me a great struggle of anger, which I do still struggle with today. And so those were just things that I really harbored against them. I really felt like they didn't really set me up for success, especially going into marriage and family life on an emotional level or a practical level. So we never really did anything as a family. Like we didn't have a family culture. I have one older brother, and we didn't really eat dinners together. We didn't do stuff as a family. Both my parents worked, and I had to learn a lot of things on my own. I was alone a lot. And I just kind of felt like I didn't have a lot of guidance. And so that definitely also contributed to me being resentful towards them. But anyways, here are some conclusions that I've kind of made along the way, things that I realized as I was trying to work on forgiving my parents, because I knew that was a pretty pivotal thing that I needed to resolve, or maybe not fully resolve, but I definitely needed to get a good hold on if I wanted to have a healthy marriage, if I wanted to have a healthy family life. I knew a pretty foundational piece was healing from my parents. Um, anyway, so the first thing that kind of helped in the process was realizing that my parents were in just as much need of mercy, of the Lord's mercy, as I was. Because the reality is that hurt people. And as much as I was hurt and wanted to really fixate on that hurt, um, and I was and I experienced a lot of suffering by their hands. When I really looked at my parents and I looked at their lives and I looked at their marriage, they were really unhappy. My parents had a lot of conflict between each other. They didn't come from great family backgrounds either. And so I was just kind of, I'm getting, it's just kind of cyclical because you get so mad at your parents for not giving you the things that you wish they did. And I'm sure they feel the same way in some shape or form about their own upbringing. And so that was a pretty key moment for me, was realizing that if I if I wanted to move on and forgive my parents, I needed to see how much I had to really see and observe their own suffering, um, and come to the realization that the same way that I want patience and compassion and mercy to be bestowed upon me on a very basic level, I need to be able to give that to my parents. Because I was upset that, they one of the things that I had beef with my parents about was that they always got upset with me whenever I got emotional, which was always ironic to me because they were such turbulent and emotional people themselves. Um, and so that was something that, yeah, that always just really bothered me. And so I always demanded patience from them. I said, "Oh," like, I would tell them, like, like, "Have mercy on me," and then yet I wasn't having mercy on them. So, anyways, I think that was something that was pretty key. The next thing was as I started to as I started to become just more intentional about wanting to heal and work on those things with my parents, I had to stop telling people my story because at least in the way that I would do it at the time was just really highlighting the ways in which I was hurt by my parents. And really all that was doing was reigniting the hurt that they caused me, but also just making me feel good, kind of slamming my parents in a and I don't think at the time, I don't think I thought that I was being malicious. I think I genuinely thought with intention that, I was this was part of the healing process, sharing your story and telling other people about how you're hurt. But when I honestly evaluated at least the way that I was doing it, really I was just giving myself an opportunity to speak poorly about my parents because part of it allowed me to, or part of it kind of felt like it was kind of payback towards them in a petty sort of way. My poor parents, like my poor parents didn't know how poorly I was speaking about them. And that kind of made me feel good that they wouldn't know so that I could do it more. I mean, that's essentially what gossip is, right? Just like slandering people's good name. And so I had to stop doing that. I kind of just stopped telling my story to people in general. I definitely took way too much pleasure and enjoyment in sharing about my own wounds that they never they would never close if I always opened them all the time. So I stopped doing that, and then I started intentionally speaking highly of them, especially when I didn't want to, and especially when I didn't really have a lot of good things to say. Because there were definitely a lot of moments where on an exterior level, when people would meet my parents, they actually are, but they at least were really good at putting a facade of being happy, like happy, joyful people. And I would say now in present day, they truly are. But I do think they were putting more of a mask on as I was growing up and, when they would meet my friends when I was in college or as a teen or whatever. And so people would say, "Oh, your parents seem so happy," um, or "Your mom's a really good cook." And I didn't want to affirm those things about them because, again, I just I was resentful towards them, so I didn't want to affirm those things about them. And then usually let that be an opportunity to be like, "Yeah, yeah, no, they're," but I mean, like, it's not really like that all the time. It's like, no, just don't say that. Just say thanks. Yeah, you're right, and move on. Because giving yourself an opportunity to utilize that to to speak poorly of your parents, yeah, it's just not gonna get you anywhere. And that's a really basic thing, but it's so easy to fall into these, like, really superficial, um, yeah, like, petty things and just not to be the bigger person in those moments and to put aside your own, like, the things that within you that nobody's even really aware about. Like, you don't have to be you don't have to tell every single person that you encounter that you're hurting from your parents. And I definitely did whenever I was in youth ministry or things like that, and there were opportunities to share about my parents, I get excited to share about my parents, which is very bad. Anyways, so I stopped doing that. I stopped kind of like speaking about my relationship with them at all until I got to a place where I could actually talk about them well and talk about them nicely and in a manner that was kind. Okay. Anyways, okay, I'm gonna keep going. So another thing that kind of was important to me, more so as I got older and then started to try to pursue just like being a more virtuous and holy person. Um, trying to, yeah, trying to pursue those things to not let these new good revelations that I was coming to allow that to be ammo towards them. So if that didn't really make sense, what I'm saying is like, you know, as you get further on in the journey and you start to heal and you start to come to these really good realizations, it's really easy to take that and then project it on how either how, they're so behind in that manner. Like, oh my goodness, like I came to this revelation and like, they're in their 60s and they they still haven't figured that out. Like, oh my goodness, And that's just not gonna help. It's not gonna help um any progress that you make. You came to all these good revelations and then you set yourself back a million times over because you're prideful. And so I had to learn to kind of come to these good truths and these good revelations and not blame my parents that I didn't come to those sooner, for one, and to just rejoice in them without attaching them to my parents at all, especially when it came to motherhood and things that I was learning about, the kind of mom that I want to be. It was really easy to kind of take these beautiful characteristics, these beautiful things that I was learning about being a mom and the kind of woman I wanted to be. And instead of the focus of that being, um, the focus of all of those thoughts and realizations be thank the Lord that He's blessing me with these realizations now so that I can hopefully like bestow those upon my children or, give my kids the kind of foundation and formation that I didn't get to receive. It's so easy to take those things and then look at your parents or look at or anybody really and be like, why are you so behind? And blame them that they didn't help you come to those realizations sooner and judge them and be so critical about them that they still haven't come to those conclusions yet. So, um, definitely there and then in light of that, okay, a another part of that is, especially when we come to truths and we come to different conclusions in our faith journey about ourselves, about maybe the way we want to live, or convictions about our family and our marriage, or the kind of woman we want to be. I think it's really easy to kind of take those good things that are true, and kind of rush the process for other people to come to those conclusions. And the reality is like there was a point that brought you to the place that you are now where you come to realize those things. And that's a journey very particular to you. And obviously I think we can obviously help people on the journey to come to those realizations sooner, or at least put them on their hearts and give them food for thought so that it is something that they can kind of even start the process of thinking about if maybe they haven't. There's definitely a tactful way of communicating true, good, and beautiful things without pressuring people and having this sort of like impatience with them, to get to those conclusions too. Anyways, there were a lot of things about being a woman and being a mother that I realized that I wanted to pursue for myself that I felt like I wasn't given or equipped with. Um, and instead of, and everybody wants, like, everybody can go about that a different way. But I decided that the best way for me to do that was just to live that out faithfully and not really preach that to my parents. And lo and behold, as I'm traversing through family life, my parents had two children, and currently we're about to have our fifth. And the amount of like appreciation and praise that comes from my parents about how we live our life and um and the kind of woman I am that my mom affirms in me, I never I never imagined that my parents would say those things to me. So sometimes sometimes it is just playing the long game with people who have hurt you. And sometimes the healing comes when like and healing comes in ways that you don't expect it, and God brings healing in areas to your life when you don't necessarily expect it. And sometimes it is a long game. It's a longer game than just, you know, 5 years into your marriage. It could be several decades. But I think the point is not to push for that day to come, but to spend your um focuses on just on healing and working towards being the person you want to be, the kind of woman, the kind of mother you want to be, and letting God take care of the rest, to put it very simply. Anyways, woo, getting a little emotional here. Okay. The last thing, this is, I mean, okay, yeah. So this is kind of part of the journey, but also more just an anecdote, which is it's probably gonna make me emotional then. Is I definitely carried a lot of wounds from my parents. Once I started having kids though, and I started seeing them with my children, um, there are a few things that I realized about that. One, when I was growing up, when I was growing up, and in general, when your parents are raising when your parents are raising you, they're just in a completely different season of life. You know, they're they're also probably figuring a lot of things out. They're in the thick of family life. They might not be their best selves. They might not have the capacities that they're able to give once you're a lot older, and that's really unfortunate and that's sad. But sometimes it's not that they don't want to love you, they're and it's sometimes it's not that they want to do a bad job, but unfortunately the product of them feeling stretched or overworked or tired or whatever conglomerate of things that are going on in their lives that you're probably not even aware of as a child. The product of that is that, yeah, you kind of got the short end of the stick. And I don't think it should be that way, but I'm just saying that the reality is that, sometimes we project on our parents that they're being more malicious towards us than they actually are, when really they're just broken people who are also figuring it out, and we need to be more merciful towards them. Anyways, but once I started having kids and started seeing my 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 parents with my kids, and at this point in time, at this point in time in present day, my parents' marriage has totally transformed. It is night and day from what I experienced as a child growing up to now, which is another good example of just your parents are people too, and that they're on the journey. They're on a journey too. Anyways, so um, going back to what I was saying, so seeing them with my parents are now at a point in time in their lives. I can tell that they have capacity to love, and the way that I see my dad play with my children, and I see the way that my mom is so loving towards my babies and my children, but just particularly babies because you know grandmas always love babies. Um, is is so redeeming because I look at the way that my parents love my children, and I think, if that's how much my parents love my children, how much more did they love me? I just didn't realize it at the time, and they didn't show it very well. Um, but seeing them love my children has just completely redeemed in so many ways all the things that I've held towards them and the hurt that I've experienced from them. That brought tremendous healing. Like, because in the journey, like when you're in the thick of kind of figuring out, like, what's it gonna be? Or I don't know if that's necessarily what people are always thinking of, but sometimes you think like, okay, when is the point that you come to a place where you've forgiven them, like you've really forgiven them. And for me, that moment, and sometimes, everybody's moment is different, but for me, that moment was just is seeing my parents with my children. That has really redeemed anything that they lacked in parenthood, they redeemed completely in their grand motherhood, fatherhood. And yeah, anyways, that's been something that I've carried with. And those are just a few things, kind of, yeah, kind of a few things that just really shaped and changed that. Anyways, okay, last thoughts. These are my final thoughts. Or these are some final thoughts, which is this. You don't have to be defined by the things you weren't given. I think it would have been really easy for me to tell myself that I couldn't do this, that I can't have the kind of marriage I want because I wasn't given a good example of that, or I can't be a good mother, or I'm going to really struggle being a good mother because my mom wasn't really there for me and didn't really teach me or prepare me for this life or for this life, like this vocation. And I guess maybe just a piece of encouragement is in all things, we don't have to be limited. We don't have to limit ourselves, right? You can pave whatever path or journey, and you can change and you can redeem all the parts of yourself that you feel like you were lacking, that you weren't given. And it's up to you. It's up to you to kind of decide. Because that one there's comes a point where you can't blame your parents for everything. And that you just have to take extreme ownership for your life, for the way you live your life, the habits that you have, the character, the vices, the character flaws that you have, and decide that you're going to let the Lord um, make that into a place that has been redeemed, make that into a place that you actually have completely, like, that you completely thrive in. Um, and and that's the beautiful thing, is that we sometimes hear like the platitude of like, oh, um like, God gives the grace, and God does give the grace. He gives ample amounts of grace, but He also builds on our nature, and it's hard to, um, it's hard to reach supernatural heights when you allow yourself to be so limited by your nature. Another just really basic thing that I kind of came to the conclusion of for myself in regards to healing was just, what kind of woman do I want to be, and what kind of example do I want to set for my children as they get older, as they start navigating relationships, and what kind of disposition or attitude do I want them to have towards me? Because the reality is I'm probably going to mess up. Or no, I'm definitely not going to do things perfectly. There's definitely going to be areas where I've hurt my children, where I could have done better, um, intentionally or unintentionally. And I'm going to want them to have mercy on me. And how am I really going to equip them to do that and give them the heart capacity to do that if I didn't have the heart capacity to do that for my own parents? So that's something that definitely has convicted me. That's something that convicts me now, even when I get into things with my parents to this day. I'm just going to share a really just quick story of our after I had our last baby, and I was just kind of in a pretty vulnerable state, just like emotional and kind of turbulent. And anyways, my parents are around, and my parents said just some hurtful things about the past. I've try to vaguely piece that together, but they said something about the past, and it really hit me in that moment that, wow, okay, this is the first time in a long time that I'm a grown woman hearing hearing these things come from my parents, and then kind of this is the test, this is the test of, did I, because I haven't been challenged in this in a while. So have I really have I really overcome the things that I thought I had over the last while? Or am I going to act like that child and act from a place of hurt from my from the past? Anyways, by the grace of God and His goodness, He definitely gave me the words to respond to them well, um, and to be able to say, you know, th- true things of, whatever whatever blank thing they said. That really hurt me, but I love you. And definitely after that kind of conversation and being challenged and like kind of put to the test, it was such a beautiful gift from the Lord that reminded me, one, that I'm still on the journey and there's still things to work on, but two, how far the Lord has taken me, and to praise Him for that. I couldn't you can't do it without him. So, anyways, those were just some beautiful moments for me, and, uh and yeah, I think I'll stop there. So, anyways, I hope that's helpful. I hope that brings maybe just some good food for thought in your own relationship in your life with your own parents, um, and yeah, and hopefully at the end of this, if you can't say that you can't confidently say that you love your parents, hopefully you can work towards that because, it's a beautiful place to get to, and it's only really just going to bless you and your children. So, anyways, thanks for joining me for my musings this week. I'll see you next time.